welcome to Core Volunteer Training, everyone. We are on our final night of the series for this cycle, and it's called Celebrating Our Work Through Stories Together. And our special guest we're lucky to have with us tonight is none other than the founder and the president of Citizens Climate Lobby, Marshall Saunders. I'll just suffice it to say that Marshall has profoundly impacted my life as well as the lives of all of those that are involved with CCL through his vision with the organization. And we're incredibly honored to have you on tonight's call, Marshall. Thank you so much. The agenda is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to have a chance to learn about just the power of stories, since that's really the focus of tonight's celebration. Then we'll pass it to Marshall and have a chance to really learn about his background. And then we'll have a chance to open it up for more a Q&A discussion, and then pivot to really being able to highlight all of your stories, because tonight's really not only about listening and learning about the origins of CCL and Marshall's own beginnings with the successes and failures that come with beginning CCL, but also helping provide a supportive community for you all to practice sharing your story. So we'll get into that in a little bit. Speak towards the end about inspiring change, and then talk about looking ahead. So just to quickly frame Marshall's kind of discussion tonight, many people that are familiar with Citizens Climate Lobby are aware that we're an organization that's working on creating the political will for a livable world. But many people also don't realize that we have a secondary purpose that is equally important, and that is empowering each of us as individuals to experience breakthroughs in exercising our own personal and political power. And that's really where tonight's focused webinar comes in, focusing on how we can empower ourselves through sharing our stories. There's really two ways that we can share our knowledge. We can either push it out and push out information and kind of just have an endless stream, directed at whoever we're targeting, or we can pull them in with a story. And if anyone's ever been a part of hearing a storyteller give an impressive oratory, we know the importance and the power that stories have in really shaping our own kind of human dynamic even today. Here's a powerful quote from the famous Japanese poet Hayao Miyazaki, who says that, "I do believe in the power of story. I believe that stories have an important role to play in the formation of human beings, and that they can stimulate, amaze, and inspire their listeners." And that's really where all of you come in, because as communities, we're bonded by shared values. We create groups, we create tribal identities, we create focused niche areas of our own communities, and we communicate how we value the world through storytelling. And as a result, as we practice telling these stories, we have a chance, as this slide says, to not only synchronize our brains, but to really share with those around us, whether it's a large audience or a smaller group that we might be involved with, to really say and emphasize, hey, this is important to me too. I'd like to get involved in that. I'm inspired by the story that you've told that moves me to really also find out how I can also contribute. And so with that, after Marshall shares, we will have a chance to really emphasize that all of us have a story. And just like Michael was actually demonstrating before we pivoted to highlighting Marshall's work, the stories that you have to share are equally critical and just as essential to kind of highlight and really get the practice and sharing to help get the word out and beyond kind of CCL's network. How can we engage others throughout the larger community? But without any further ado is to just really emphasize and set up Marshall's background in having him tell his own story. Because for many reasons, many people look at CCL today and see a thriving, successful organization bordering on 100,000 volunteers almost now, that is effective, that's focused, that has an identity, that's making progress. But it wasn't always that way. And I'll let you take it from here, Marshall. But we're so honored to have you here tonight with our Core Volunteer Training Program and to learn about the background behind CCL.
Okay. Well, Brett, thank you. Hello, everybody. I appreciate your being on the line. And so I just want to tell you how this thing got started. And I wish I could tell you that I'm a real smart guy and wrote out a business plan, and we followed the business plan. And here we are with almost 100,000 volunteers. But of course, that would not be true because that's not what happened. In the summer of 2007, so 10 years ago, I was in full swing giving the Inconvenient Truth slideshow, the Al Gore slideshow. I'd seen it 3 times. I was just very moved by it, and I got trained. And I was giving one. I was giving one a week. Giving the talks was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. It was exciting to me, and there was always a technology thing that made it more exciting for me. But there I was, and the hard part, the show was the fun part. The hard part was getting anybody to listen to me. I don't know if anybody's experienced that before, but I sure have. However, I was inviting myself to enough service clubs and churches and schools, and it was really going pretty well. And as I say, one a week for 10 months during the first 10 months, I think it was. Yeah. So the first, what I thought was a true invitation, and I'm talking about where I had not invited myself, it was the International Affairs Club in a place called Rancho Bernardo, north of San Diego. And Rancho Bernardo is a pretty big place, and I thought, well, the Foreign Affairs Club of that burb is going to be pretty important. So when I got up there to give the Inconvenient Slideshow talk, it was in a rest home. And 10 or 11 retirees had come downstairs to hear me talk. And they were probably, bored out of their minds and came down to hear me talk. And so I hooked up all the gear, no problems. And I gave them a half an hour slideshow. And of course, if you know the Inconvenient Truth slideshow, it's about excessive rain and floods and drought and fires and melting glaciers and sea level rise and warming oceans and more violent storms. And the slides are really beautiful and dramatic. And then when I had completed that, I opened it up for questions. Anybody have any questions? Was anybody awake? I didn't know. And an elderly lady in the back row, now that would be the second row, she raised her hand and said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "I can't read with the new light bulbs. I can't read with the new light bulbs. What should I do?" And then she said, I didn't know what to do. She said, "Could I use 2 of the new light bulbs, or should I use one of the old kind?" And I didn't know. And she said, "Well, what would be better?" I don't know. So I just stood there kind of dumbfounded. I had given them half an hour on this huge global problem, and there we were. Was it to be one of the old kind of light bulbs or 2 of the new kind? And I could just think, bless her heart, bless her heart. I may have just said nothing to her. Then another elderly lady, her name is Lee. I since found out what her name is, Lee. And she was also sitting in the back row. Again, that would be the second row. Then she said, then what should we do? And I felt a little trapped after a pause, I said, and I was thinking, I said, well, what's needed is a methodology of results. And essentially, that's thousands of ordinary people, well trained, lobbying their members of Congress and the media in a very persistent, honest way, and yet friendly way. Just very persistent and yet friendly. This lady said, well, why don't you do that? And now I was trapped. And I thought for a minute, and I finally said, well, I haven't done that because people wouldn't come to a meeting like that. And before I knew it, she said, I'll help you. Now I was trapped and not knowing what else to say in front of these, very distinguished elderly people. I finally said, okay, let's do it. I didn't know who she was. She didn't know who I was. But I said, okay, let's do it. Well, when I got back home to Coronado, where we live, I picked up the phone and I rented a library room near the retirement home. And I started inviting people. Now, the library was near Lee and her friends in the retirement home, but it was 35 miles north of where Pam and I live, and 35 miles north, really, of anybody that I knew. And on my end, the inviting was not going so well. It was about 3 weeks out, I think. And I called people, and I think somebody said something like, Marshall, we both live in Coronado. Why would I drive to Rancho Bernardo to hear you talk for 3 hours? And so the inviting was just not going too well. At least I didn't think so. So I called my brand new friend Lee to see how the inviting was going on her end. And guess what? No answer. So a few days later, I thought, well, maybe they're out of town. Maybe it's not caller ID. Maybe she's out of town. So I called again, and again, no answer. And a few days later, I called her, I think on the fourth call, her husband answered the phone and said, it was kind of a gruff voice. I could tell he was irritated with me. He said, Lee's arthritis has kicked up and she can't help you. That was the whole thing. And I thought, well, I'm going to be talking to an empty room. And even worse would be if 2 people from where we live, 35 miles north, drove up there to hear me talk, and they were the only ones in the room. So I thought about canceling. Like the whole organization is at stake because there is no other group, there is no other staffer other than me, and it's not going well. And I just thought about calling it all off. And this is important. I had a friend who was supporting me. He wasn't helping me on it, but I could call him and tell him what's going on with me and all the problems I'm having. And, he essentially said, well, keep inviting, just keep inviting. So I did. Morning of the group start, and again, it was the first one ever, I had not yet seen the library room that I had rented. And Pam, that's my wife, and I arrived early. It started at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. We arrived early, and we went into the library, and we started looking for the room. Well, we couldn't find it. And we talked to the lady behind the counter. Well, she just she looked around a little bit, and she said, "Well, I don't know where it is." And after much searching, we discovered an outside stairway that led to the second deck. And it was a big library, so you go down the outside walkway and you turn left and go down the outside walkway and then go through a unmarked door, as I remember, on the left, then down two hallways, and through a door on the right. And that was our meeting. And I thought, where our meeting room was, and I thought, this is not ideal. If anybody gets as close as the parking lot, they're not gonna find this room. And well, I staked Pam out at the bottom of the stairs, so here is maybe one of my biggest surprises with CCL. I was expecting like nobody, and 28 people showed up. And with 5 minutes before the end, number 29 walked in, and I didn't know half of them. I'm pretty, good at getting on the phone and ask people to do stuff, but half of them, I don't know how they got there. They weren't from the old folks' home, and I didn't know them, and so somehow they had gotten the word secondhand. This is, now 3 hours, and it's been pretty good discussion. Near the end of the talk, I asked a punchline question. Now, my heart is in my throat, and I said, "Who wants to do this thing with me?" And I was hoping for at least 4. I felt like I had to have 4 to start a group, and I said, "Who wants to do this thing with me?" And sinking feeling, and it's either every hand in the room went up or almost every hand in the room went up, and including the guy who had just gotten there. And I thought, what could he possibly know? We divided into 3 groups: North County, San Diego, Central San Diego, and South Bay. We had the first national call ever in 3 weeks later, and it was in early November of 2007. And Brent Blackwelder, who at that time was the dean, it was another one of my surprises, how many people, when they saw what we were doing, wanted to help us. And Brent Blackwelder was called the dean of congressional, interviewers on the interviewees on the climate. Congressional, where people were inviting him a lot to testify in front of Congress, and he said, "Yes, I would. I'll be on." And he stepped out of. He was in a board meeting in Washington D.C. He stepped out of the board meeting and called us on his cell phone, and we have. That's been a big surprise to me how much people have wanted to help us. So that's how Citizens Climate Lobby got started. And kind of a little review. I was trapped by 2 elderly ladies in a rest home and 29 volunteers who showed up on a Saturday morning for a 3-hour presentation, not knowing what to expect or what they might be getting into. And they had found their way up the outside stairway around to the back of the library, down 2 hallways, through a door on the right, and God bless them. And that's how we got started, by the skin of our teeth.
Well, that's some powerful
Brett.
stuff for organizers throughout the country that are clearly concerned about this issue, Marshall. And we're going to open it up for questions here in a little bit before allowing all of us to have a chance to share other stories. But one quick question I think all of us are asking is, how do you feel like that early experience with adversity, is more of a metaphor or informs even our work today against unlikely odds?
Well, I don't know how to answer that. Let me just take a crack at it. Keep going. When it became obvious, at least to me, that nobody was going to show up or 2 people, keep going, keep inviting. And I think another piece there is we need to have support. a person can't do that. If I hadn't had support from, it was really who it was Sam Daly Harris, the founder of Results, and I talked to him before that meeting, and I talked to him afterward. You know, that Saturday morning, and without that support, I would have I don't know. I think I would have caved somewhere along the line. But I want people to know that there is always that threat of you know, this is not going to work, and I'm going to be embarrassed. And you know, and yet in the face of that, you keep going, and then you find, as I did, I found those 29 people, most of whom I didn't know, who were looking for something like me, as I was looking for something to do and not knowing what to do to be effective. Other people were looking for something to do. And then there's this other piece about Brent Blackwelder, you know, very important guy on Capitol Hill at that time. He's retired now, willing to step out of a board meeting and call us on the telephone and talk to us.
Kind of being aware that, you know, even if it's a reach, not being afraid to make that ask and really invite kind of boldness in the response for action.
Absolutely, yes, Brad. What an honor to be on this call with people. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you, Marshall. And let's open it up here. You know, it's not just me on the line. We've got so many folks that have also been through a lot of the other training that would love to also ask questions. So let's at least have 5 minutes for anyone else that would like to engage and really dive in deeper with Marshall. Michael, I see your line's unmuted. Would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just jumped in, but I'm interested, Marshall, when in that process, at what point did you come up with the carbon fee and dividend idea? Because one of the things that seems so elegant to me about CCL is that the ask is very simple. It's clear. It seems like it's going to be effective. It seems politically palatable to pretty much anybody on either side of the aisle who would come to believe in climate science. And so just the elegance of that seems to me like it must be part of your success. So I'm just wondering, how does that wrap in?
Okay, well, what a great question. What a great question. Look, when I finished up that group start meeting, you know, the question then was, okay, what do we lobby on? Well, stable climate. Well, what kind of legislation? And I had no idea about it. And so we lobbied on something called feed-in tariffs ban, and we did that for a while. And then we got some kind of a tip that what needed to happen, there was going to be a big important meeting about building codes all over the country. So we lobbied cities and counties for building codes. And then I called the big green groups, and they said, oh yeah, we have Waxman Markey, a cap and trade deal is wonderful. Well, by the time they got through explaining cap and trade and offset, don't leave that part out because that's where the mischief is. It was just like it's like we were just wandering in the desert. And I called a guy. Well, I think it was Brent Blackwelder, same guy. He said, you ought to call Tom Stokes. I called Tom Stokes, and Tom said, I'm heading up a briefing in the House Ways and Means Committee. It's going to be in about 10 days, I think. And he said, I think it's better than anything you've been lobbying on. What is it? He said, well, it's called carbon fee and dividend. Well, I had never heard of it, but I never met Tom Stokes, but I got on a plane and jumped on a plane, flew over there. I got to the House Ways and Means Committee, and first of all, that room was full of people. And there was this very distinguished panel of a couple of economists that, and one of them I had kind of heard his name or read his name in weekly magazine or something. Rob Shapiro, another guy named Gil Metcalf, economist, and John Larson, the member of the House who had introduced a carbon fee and dividend bill. And again, this was, let me see, this was 2008, late 2008. So we've been going for, I think, about a year. And then on the far left hand of the panel was Jim Hansen. And so if you don't know Jim Hansen, I imagine everybody does, but if you don't, look him up. He was head of NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies. So he was a top scientist at NASA. Well, these people started explaining carbon fee and dividend. And I just sat there, it's like, wow, this makes a lot of sense to me. Where have I been all my life? And so just great. I knew that's what we were going to do. And when I got back home, I called Tom and asked him if he would be our guest speaker in January of '09. First conference call, and he said he would, and he came on and he explained it to everybody, and almost everybody liked it. Some didn't. Some were stuck on cap and trade, and we lost a few partners then. And but the elegance of it, you're right. It's elegant, and and also I had this vague hope that something good was gonna turn up if we just kept going, and then there it was.
Thank you, Marshall. I'd love to open it up for anyone that kind of wants to jump right in and share a story. And I'll put the prompts on here, right, so everyone can see if you're tuned in online. What moment are you most proud of? What experiences have helped expand your own comfort zone and led you to unknown places?
Sure. Thanks for having me on the call. I kind of have to first share my own story real quickly, and that was getting the call from Marshall inviting me to come to DC when I was terrified about going and meeting with people who I thought were bigger than myself in Congress. And he helped really make me realize that I could walk my talk by heading to DC. So I went there in 2010, and I was terrified going into these meetings. My papers in my hands were shaking, and I didn't know what to expect. And it was a life-changing moment for me to be there, speaking up for what I believe in, no matter how uncomfortable I felt at the moment. And it really changed my life and helped me see how stepping out of that comfort zone to do what is important to you is really a valuable thing for me, I felt, to take on. And it was very inspiring to me. And I went from being the terrified volunteer to my work as a regional coordinator. It's just been really exciting for me to see volunteers, and I won't go into detail here, but volunteers from around the region who are just to see them have that experience that I did, where they go in and they're not necessarily comfortable, or they're trying on being in a meeting with an editorial board or a member of Congress or any of those things that we work on as levers of political will, and just watch that shift happen in their lives, where they see, oh wow, I can do this. This is amazing, and this gives me the opportunity to speak up for something that's so important. And so it's just been exciting to see, for instance, an Army veteran from Wyoming who, with barely the funds to get to DC, got there, stuck it out. We watched him just transform into somebody who really spoke out about this issue in a very powerful way from his experience. And now he's the state coordinator for Wyoming. Or getting another volunteer had the opportunity to speak on a public TV station, and I just remember her turning to me and going, you know, I never imagined I'd ever be doing something like this, and to see that transformation that happens with the volunteers throughout the organization is just it's inspiring, and I think it keeps the juices flowing in this work that we're doing as we keep pressing on and being persistent and friendly along the way.
We often see people already doing things in any field with any cause, and we wonder how they got there, and they must have something distinctly different than us. And all it takes is slowing down to remember that it was one incremental decision at a time that got them there, and we can get there too. So
let me just say, I think this is a wonderful call, and I don't know what to say. I'm moved by everybody, and thank you for the courage, and it takes courage to. We've been talking about getting out of the comfort zone and making a contribution to life. There's nothing better. Sometimes it's kind of scary. It's for me, and just thank everybody. So that's about what I got to say.
I love it, Marshall. Well, we are so grateful for you making time. I'll just close the bookend with that same kind of spirit here too, with a quote from Nikki Reeve, which just emphasizes that, again, as we tell our stories, we can change opinions, inspire us to achieve goals that we didn't think were possible, and to demonstrate how we can change things for the better in a world right now that I think really many people are yearning and looking for solutions that we can help really highlight and point out that people might not be aware of. And to also just emphasize that the stories that we tell ourselves as well as those around us literally make the world. So this is a quote by Michael Margolis. If you want to change the world, you need to change your story. And this truth applies both to individuals and institutions. And I think it frames exactly the work that we as CCL volunteers throughout the country are doing, in emphasizing that we have the solutions, we know how to change things for the better, and it's up to us to inspire and to really reach out and speak from the heart to those around us to help instill the truth and the belief that we have that ability as well. So with that, make sure to get out there and share your story. If anyone after tonight wants to make sure to plug in, I know that this is a month off after that, but we'll reboot again at the beginning of the year. Please reach out to me. I've got my email in the chat window there. I know that Bill and anyone else on the call, Marshall as well, are more than happy to field questions too. So just let us know how we can be there for you. And we're just so grateful for you making time tonight to be on the call. We hope you found this training useful. And with that, I'll just open up all lines, and we'll really kind of wrap things up by saying thank you, everyone, for being here. We are the change we wish to see in the world.
Okay, good night, everybody.